Most people think intelligence announces itself. It speaks louder, argues better, wins debates, proves itself. The Sophia Empath eventually discovers real psychological intelligence behaves very differently. It observes, it waits, it notices. Because the person who understands human behavior rarely needs to convince anyone. Carl Jung believed that what people reveal unconsciously is often far more important than what they deliberately communicate. That is why silence becomes such a powerful teacher. The Sophia Empath begins noticing something strange. The longer they remain quiet, the more other people begin explaining themselves. Not because they are questioned, because silence creates psychological space, and uncomfortable minds rush to fill empty space. Some people fill it with honesty, others fill it with performance, others unknowingly expose everything they hope to hide. The Sophia Empath simply watches. At first, they assume everyone notices these patterns, the unnecessary explanations, the forced laughter, the constant need to appear impressive, the subtle shift in someone's voice when the conversation becomes uncomfortable. But slowly, they realize most people are listening to words while they are watching behavior. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious always leaks through repetition. Not once, repeatedly. The person who constantly interrupts, the person who never answers directly, the person who praises you publicly, but quietly competes with you privately. Different personalities, the same unconscious language. That is where the Sophia Empath gains an advantage few people recognize. Not because they become manipulative, because they stop reacting immediately. People reveal far more when they believe nobody is studying them. The Sophia Empath learns that observation is often more powerful than confrontation, because confrontation changes behavior. Observation reveals it. People often think outsmarting someone means defeating them. The Sophia Empath discovers something much quieter. You do not outsmart people by speaking more. You outsmart them by allowing them enough space to reveal who they have always been. And once repeated behavior becomes visible, very little remains hidden. The Sophia Empath eventually begins asking a different question. Not, how do I prove I understand people? But, what do people reveal when they believe nobody is paying attention? That single question quietly changes every relationship they will ever have. The strange thing about silence is that most people underestimate it. They assume silence means uncertainty, weakness, confusion. But Carl Jung believed that the unconscious often reveals itself most clearly when it believes it is no longer being observed. The Sophia Empath slowly discovers this. For years, they believed every uncomfortable moment needed to be filled. Every misunderstanding needed an explanation. Every accusation demanded a defense. But something changes. The moment they stop rushing to speak, people begin revealing themselves. The person who cannot tolerate silence often fears their own thoughts. The person who constantly dominates conversations often fears losing control. The person who immediately changes the subject often fears what the current one might expose. Different behaviors, same unconscious pattern. Silence quietly removes distraction. And without distraction, patterns become impossible to ignore. The Sophia Empath begins noticing something remarkable. The less they interrupt, the more people contradict themselves. The less they defend, the more others over-explain. The less they react, the more emotional performances begin falling apart. People often expose themselves while trying to protect themselves. That is why patience becomes such a dangerous form of intelligence. Carl Jung believed that the shadow cannot remain perfectly hidden forever. Sooner or later, it leaks into behavior, into tone, into timing, into repeated habits. The Sophia Empath no longer searches for perfect evidence. They watch for repetition. the compliment that quietly carries comparison, the apology that always arrives after consequences, the promise that sounds sincere but never survives reality. Different words, same pattern. People don't always reveal themselves through honesty. Sometimes they reveal themselves through consistency. That realization changes how the Sophia Empath listens. They stop listening only to what people say. They begin listening to what people repeatedly choose. Because repeated choices are almost impossible to fake forever. And once the Sophia Empath understands that, they no longer feel pressured to expose anyone. Reality eventually does it for them. The most powerful observer is rarely the loudest person in the room. It is the one who understands that silence often collects more truth than endless conversation ever could. The Sophia Empath eventually realizes that the smartest person in the room is rarely the one speaking the most. It is usually the one collecting the most information. For years, the Sophia Empath believed understanding people required asking better questions, but Carl Jung believed that people unconsciously answer questions. They were never asked, not through words, through behavior, through timing, through emotional reactions they never intended to reveal. That realization changes everything. The Sophia Empath stops trying to pull truth out of people. They simply create enough space for truth to walk out on its own. Someone receives unexpected criticism. One person becomes curious, another becomes defensive. Someone hears another person's success. One becomes inspired, another quietly becomes resentful. Someone is told no. One respects the boundary, another begins negotiating with guilt. Different situations, same revelation. Pressure does not create character. Pressure reveals it. The Sophia Empath begins trusting these moments, not because people suddenly become honest, because emotions temporarily silence the mask. Carl Jung believed that the persona requires energy to maintain, but under stress, the shadow begins speaking. The controlled person suddenly lashes out. The generous person suddenly becomes possessive. The confident person suddenly becomes deeply insecure. Not because they changed, because the hidden self briefly became visible. The Sophia Empath quietly notices and says very little. People often mistake observation for passivity. It isn't. Observation is delayed judgment. The Sophia Empath no longer rushes to conclusions. They allow behavior to repeat again and again. Because one unusual moment proves very little, but repeated moments create undeniable patterns. People don't always reveal who they are during comfort. They reveal who they are when comfort disappears. That is why the Sophia Empath no longer studies personalities. They study consistency. Who remains respectful under pressure? Who remains honest when lying would be easier? Who remains kind when kindness offers no reward? Those patterns cannot be performed forever. Eventually, every mask becomes too heavy to carry, and when it falls, the Sophia Empath rarely feels surprised, because they stopped believing promises long ago. They learned to believe repetition instead. That is why they no longer need to outsmart anyone through manipulation. They simply allow time to reveal what words were always trying to hide. The greatest advantage the Sophia Empath ever develops is not reading minds. It is understanding that human beings repeat themselves, not with the same words, with the same unconscious patterns. Carl Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious eventually becomes predictable, because people believe they are making new choices while quietly repeating old wounds. The Sophia Empath begins seeing this everywhere. The person who constantly seeks admiration is rarely searching for attention. They are searching for validation that never lasts. The person who controls every conversation is rarely protecting the conversation. They are protecting their own insecurity. The person who always needs to be right is often terrified of discovering they are wrong. Different behaviors, the same invisible fear. At first, the Sophia Empath tries to explain these patterns, to understand them, to forgive them, but eventually they stop trying to interrupt them, because patterns reveal more than explanations ever can. People often create stories about themselves. I've changed. I'm different now. That isn't who I am anymore. Perhaps. Perhaps not. The Sophia Empath no longer argues with those stories. They simply wait, because time quietly asks questions that conversation never can. Does respect remain when nobody is watching? Does honesty remain when deception becomes convenient? Does loyalty remain when loyalty becomes expensive? Different moments, the same truth. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious cannot hide forever. Sooner or later, it repeats itself. The Sophia Empath begins trusting repetition more than reassurance. The promise spoken once means very little. The action repeated consistently means everything. People don't always deceive others. Sometimes they spend years deceiving themselves, and once someone believes their own illusion, they become incredibly convincing. That is why the Sophia Empath no longer mistakes confidence for truth, or charm for character, or intelligence for wisdom, because wisdom observes. It doesn't rush. The Sophia Empath quietly lets people finish becoming who they truly are, without interruption, without accusation, without needing to expose them. And that patience creates something most people never develop: clarity. Because once you stop reacting to appearances, you begin recognizing identities. Not the identity people perform, the identity they unconsciously repeat. And once you learn to recognize that pattern, very few people can surprise you for long. The most dangerous mistake the Sophia Empath once made was believing that understanding someone required trusting them. For years, those two ideas felt inseparable. If I understand why they behave this way, then I should be patient. If I understand their wounds, then I should give them another chance. But Carl Jung believed that understanding and agreement are not the same thing, nor are understanding and access. The Sophia Empath slowly discovers this distinction, not through books, through disappointment, again and again. They begin noticing something almost invisible. The people who manipulate others often understand people extremely well. They know exactly what guilt sounds like, exactly what loneliness fears, exactly what hope wants to hear. Understanding alone does not create wisdom, character does. That realization changes how the Sophia Empath sees intelligence. Real intelligence is not predicting someone's next sentence. It is recognizing the pattern driving every sentence before it is spoken. The person who always becomes the victim when accountability appears. The person who suddenly becomes affectionate when they fear losing influence. The person who promises change only after consequences arrive. Different conversations, same unconscious strategy. People often think deception is complicated. Usually, it is repetitive. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious repeats unfinished psychological patterns. That is why manipulation rarely invents something new. It simply changes the setting. The Sophia Empath stops becoming fascinated by clever words. They become fascinated by recurring behavior, because behavior never gets tired of telling the truth. Only people do. The Sophia Empath eventually understands something that feels almost unfair. The easiest person to deceive is often the one desperately searching for reasons not to believe what they already know. That is why discernment becomes more valuable than intelligence. Intelligence notices details. Discernment knows which details matter. People don't outsmart you because they are more intelligent. They outsmart you only when they convince you to ignore your own perception. The Sophia Empath no longer gives that permission. They stop negotiating with repeated patterns, stop arguing with obvious contradictions, stop replacing evidence with optimism, and something quietly changes. The room becomes calmer, conversations become simpler, relationships become clearer. Not because people became more honest, because the Sophia Empath finally stopped confusing potential with reality. And once reality becomes your guide, very few people can hide behind words for long. The greatest mistake most people make is believing that influence belongs to the person who speaks best. The Sophia Empath eventually discovers influence usually belongs to the person who understands the emotional rules nobody else notices. Carl Jung believed that every human interaction contains two conversations, the one spoken aloud and the one taking place beneath awareness. Most people hear only the first. The Sophia Empath slowly begins hearing both. Someone compliments them. The words sound warm. The timing feels strange. Someone offers help. The offer sounds generous. The expectation quietly follows behind it. Someone agrees immediately, yet their body resists the decision before their mouth does. Different moments, the same hidden conversation. That realization changes how the Sophia Empath moves through the world. They stop reacting to language alone. They begin observing emotional consistency. Because words are chosen, reactions are revealed. People often rehearse what they will say. Very few rehearse how they will unconsciously behave. That is where patterns appear. The smile that fades too quickly. The irritation hidden inside fake concern. The sudden warmth that appears only after distance creates insecurity. Different expressions, the same unconscious motive. The Sophia Empath no longer interrupts these moments. Silence becomes an invitation. Not for honesty, for exposure. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious constantly seeks expression. If it cannot speak directly, it leaks through behavior. That is why the Sophia Empath rarely rushes conversations anymore. The longer people speak, the less they control what they reveal. People don't always expose themselves through lies. Sometimes they expose themselves through over-explaining, through defending accusations that were never made, through trying too hard to appear harmless. The Sophia Empath quietly notices all of it, not to judge, to understand, because understanding without immediate reaction creates something unusual: perspective. And perspective quietly removes manipulation. The person who once relied on confusion finds clarity waiting instead. The person who once depended on emotional urgency finds patience replacing panic. The person who once controlled conversations discovers that silence has become impossible to dominate. People often think power belongs to those who control others, but real psychological power belongs to the person who is no longer controlled by appearances. And once the Sophia Empath learns to observe beneath the surface, they no longer need to outsmart anyone. People eventually reveal everything to the person who has learned how to quietly watch. The final lesson the Sophia Empath learns is that the greatest psychological advantage has nothing to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with self-control. For years, they believed understanding people meant predicting them, knowing what they would say, knowing what they would do. But Carl Jung believed that the unconscious gains power only when it controls your reactions. The Sophia Empath finally understands that. The person who angers you is not always stronger than you. The person who provokes you is not always smarter than you. Often, they are simply waiting for you to react unconsciously, because unconscious reactions are predictable. Predictable people are easy to influence. The Sophia Empath begins noticing something remarkable. The less reactive they become, the less interesting they become to manipulative people. The argument receives no emotional fuel. The guilt receives no emotional payment. The criticism receives no desperate defense. Different situations, the same silence, and silence quietly changes the balance of power. Carl Jung believed that psychological maturity begins the moment awareness interrupts automatic behavior. That interruption becomes the Sophia Empath's greatest strength. Someone insults them, they observe before responding. Someone lies, they observe before judging. Someone praises them, they observe before trusting. Not because they become suspicious of everyone, because observation now comes before emotion. That single shift changes every relationship. People often think outsmarting someone means exposing them, but exposure is rarely necessary. Time reveals what confrontation usually delays. The Sophia Empath simply allows repetition to continue, because repetition always reaches the same destination. Reality. People reveal themselves through consistency. The impatient reveal themselves when forced to wait. The dishonest reveal themselves when honesty becomes costly. The selfish reveal themselves when giving offers no reward. The compassionate reveal themselves when nobody is watching. Different circumstances, the same truth. The Sophia Empath no longer feels responsible for proving anyone wrong. Reality eventually becomes the loudest voice in the room. And perhaps that is the deepest realization of all. You do not outsmart people by winning psychological games. You outsmart them by refusing to play games that require you to betray your own awareness, because the moment your reactions belong to your own consciousness, instead of someone else's manipulation, very few people can predict you anymore. And the person who cannot be predicted is often the person who can no longer be controlled. And in the end, the Sophia Empath discovers something that changes every relationship forever. The greatest form of intelligence was never learning how to read other people. It was learning how to stop betraying what they already knew. For years, they searched for certainty, proof, confirmation, someone else to validate what their intuition had been whispering all along. But Carl Jung believed that the unconscious often recognizes reality long before the conscious mind is willing to accept it. The Sophia Empath finally understands why they doubted themselves for so long. Not because their perception was wrong, because hope kept arguing with a reality. Hope kept saying, maybe this time will be different. Reality quietly answered, watch the pattern. Hope listened to promises. Reality watched repetition, and repetition never lied. The Sophia Empath eventually stops asking, what do they mean? They begin asking, what do they consistently choose? Because words describe intention. Choices reveal identity. That distinction changes everything. The manipulator still manipulates. The liar still lies. The selfish person still protects themselves first. The compassionate person still chooses kindness, even when nobody is watching. Different people, the same truth. People reveal themselves every day. Most simply are not paying attention. Carl Jung believed that the greatest confrontation is never with another human being. It is with the illusion you secretly hope is still true. The Sophia Empath finally allows those illusions to die. The illusion that everyone wants honesty. The illusion that understanding always changes people. The illusion that enough patience can heal someone who refuses to face themselves. One by one, those stories disappear, and something stronger quietly replaces them. Discernment, not suspicion, discernment. The ability to keep your heart open without leaving your mind asleep. The ability to remain compassionate without becoming predictable. The ability to understand another person's wounds without allowing those wounds to become your responsibility. People often think silence is empty. The Sophia Empath knows better. Silence is where masks become heavy. Silence is where patterns repeat. Silence is where truth becomes impatient. You never needed to outsmart anyone. Time was always doing that for you. You only needed the discipline to to stop interrupting reality before it finished revealing itself. And perhaps that is the coldest truth Carl Jung ever pointed toward. Human beings rarely hide who they are. They simply repeat themselves until someone is finally willing to believe what they have been showing all along. The Sophia Empath was never dangerous because they spoke brilliantly. They were dangerous because they learned to observe without illusion, to listen without attachment, to see without looking away. Because once you stop arguing with reality, very few people can ever deceive you the same way again. And that is the quiet advantage of the Sophia Empath, who no longer needs words to understand everything that has already been revealed.